Well, thank you, Ken. I think you've actually covered our work very, very eloquently. So all I need to do now is show you the pictures, and that'll round the evening up. I thought when I was putting this sort of presentation together, I thought it was important before we just, I was asked to show, current work that we're really doing in New York as a sort of emphasis. And I thought before we kind of just dive into what we're currently doing, it's important to kind of give a background to where we've come from and what makes us tick, and let you, as far as I can, get under our skin. So the first thing is that we restructured the office about 3 years ago to turn it into an equal partnership. And we have 13 partners. And we did that first and foremost to kind of safeguard, if you like, the longevity of the practice, but in recognition of how we work, which is collaboratively, both externally, with many consultants, and unfortunately a few are here tonight, but also amongst ourselves. And we are very much sort of 13 individuals, some quite strong characters there, some strong minds. But yet, the one thing we all see, I think, very coherently is our approach to architecture. And we're very fortunate at the moment to be doing a range of interesting projects in New York, and one of those is the Queen's Museum of Art. And they allowed us to present our current kind of New York work at the museum a couple of years ago. And Bob Ivy came to open an evening there, and we asked him to, obviously talk about us and give us his sort of reflection on ourselves. And he was very flattering. He said, I was thinking about, how do I sum up Grimshaw and the work and the body of work, and I've published many projects. And I've coined a phrase, which he coined, we couldn't use it, embedded intelligence. So he does know how to flatter. But he then kind of qualified what he meant by that. And currently, there is this sort of spate of producing buildings with all sorts of interesting and rather unusual shapes and forms. And computer power has given us the ability to do ever more complex geometries. And his thought on this was, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think the one thing I hope holds true of our work is that there is always a reason why something is shaped the way it's shaped, the way we choose a material. We're quite pragmatic, really. But that pragmatism and kind of performance approach really informs our whole design thrust. So just first of all, kind of heroes. I think let's look right backwards, kind of roots. So I would have to start with Brunel. We were lucky enough to curate an exhibition of his work, and I was lucky enough to actually refurbish his great station. It was built in 1854, Paddington. So undoubtedly somebody that we all admire, and again through his sort of ambition and engineering approach. I think Paxton of the same era would also have to feature. Anyone that can actually build, still has, I think, the world record for covering space in the shortest amount of time, which is, of course, the Crystal Palace, or the Great Exhibition of 1851. And again, that approach to understanding a problem and then finding the absolute kind of optimum solution. And then I think just to add now a 20th century character, I think Prouvé would have to be added into our kind of pot of ingredients, of inspiration. And of course, again, a man that was very much in tune with materiality, construction, and again, taking a problem and coming up with an innovative solution. And Ken mentioned the AA. In fact, of the 5 original founding partners, 3 of us were educated at the AA at various, quite wide-ranging times, Nick Grimshaw being the first and myself being the last. But we were all taught by Ron Heron. And so I would have to put Ron and Archigram in there as well, as definitely an inspiration. And you think, I remember how he told me how quickly he did this drawing, which was in an afternoon. And it still, I think, has incredible power today. And then finally, I guess, Bucky Fuller, who in many ways, time has come, and many of his teachings ring truer today than they ever did ring. Our whole approach of doing more with less, and thinking about working within a finite resource, and thinking about the problems that we all now face. And this is Bucky with Nick. Nick had just left the AA, actually, at this point, and this was his first project, which was a kind of helical service tower, which turned an old building and gave it a new use. And I've often wondered, it's such a shame it's a black and white photograph, because you probably can't see the detail, but I can imagine that tie was pretty exciting at the time. I started the work in the US back, again, about the same time as we were doing Waterloo. And the very first project, most people start at one of the edges, don't they? They come into the coast. So either you arrive at the east coast or you arrive at the west coast. And we took a different approach. We went right into the middle and started in St. Louis. We thought it was the soft spot to start. And it was a very nice place to start. I was the first foreign architect to be licensed in Missouri, so lots of interesting opportunities. But we did that project from London. So I spent a lot of time on a plane. I generally found that I wasn't in the right place at the right time. And it gave us pause for thought about if we want to work in an international, if you like, approach on certain projects, how do we best do that? And many of our kind of, if you like, our peer group out of London prefer to work basically out of London principally, and to work, around the world, but from that one center, that one point. And we felt really the only way we could truly work was to be immersed in the environment that we were working within. So that if we were going to be serious about working in New York, we have to be all working in New York and based here full-time and live here. And actually, that's the only way you can truly understand the environment you're working in, and also be in the right place at the right time when you get that sort of 2 hours notice for a meeting and so on. And so we set up our office down in Tribeca in 2001, early 2001. And we were fortunate that really right at the beginning we won our first kind of commission, which was the project for Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which was the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center, which was actually probably, I think, one of the most complex buildings we've designed. So it's on this slope on the edge of the campus overlooking the Hudson, quite a very interesting site. And the brief or the program for the project was the idea of this experimental center for electronic arts, which by its very nature, of course, is something that must be transient, it's technological, so it's going to be changing. Whatever it is today, it won't be that tomorrow. But they also wanted it to be a legacy project, with to be in 100 years to still be relevant. And that gave us, some kind of a pause to think about, well, how do you really best approach that? And then during the competition process, what emerged out of that was that the head of the school, President Jackson, Dr. Jackson, wanted to have a concert hall, or a symphonic standard, sort of an international standard, where there was no compromise. It was entirely about its musical performance. And so that really created what became a very, I think, legible and clear diagram, in that we ended up having two parts. We thought of the concert hall almost as the analog. So, that's it's entirely about creating something physical, like a musical instrument that deals with sound. And the experimental studios are really the digital. They're kind of technological approaches. And then you get this very interesting play between two different elements. You have the, if you like, the soft form of the analog, and you have the kind of sharpness and technological response of the digital. And then thinking about the concert hall, we thought if we designed something that really is just tries to achieve a very high quality of acoustic, that will give it longevity. In the same way as a Stradivarius violin sounds as beautiful today as it did when it was first made. It's because, the physics of acoustics aren't going to change. And so that was the approach, was that the concert hall becomes this sort of musical instrument. And then the slope, actually it was the Eden Project. We took them to the Eden Project that gave us our clue to the whole approach, and that we wanted to use the topography of the site to kind of mask the huge bulk of this building, and so it didn't dwarf its surrounding buildings in the campus. So this shows the layout. At the top of the page you've got the concert hall. Down below you have a 500-seat theatre, and then two experimental studio spaces. And every element is built as a building within a building, to the extent that the very large studio, which you can see here, was actually built as a concrete box and then jacked up and placed on springs. So literally every element is completely isolated. So technologically, it was very demanding. And we worked with Davis Brodie Bond, who were architect of record. And it was a very good, I think, collaboration on what was a very demanding client with very demanding standards and some quite technologically difficult issues to deal with. But I think finally it came out extremely well. And I guess, you know, I'm talking visually about the concert hall and about some of the technological aspects that give it its physical form. But I think the proof of the pudding, obviously, is in how it works acoustically. And in a way, you shouldn't really talk about a concert hall. You should go and sit in it and listen to it. The form was kind of, this is pre-BIM, sort of BIM beta, maybe. And we designed it all in 3D. And again, it was a shared computer model that we shared with the engineers, Bureau Happold. And then ultimately the fabricator of the timber shell, who also coordinated the integration of all the structure and services. And then it sits behind this very large, glass wall, which we designed with the German fabricators Gartner. And it's actually one of the first, I think, examples of a heated system. So it means we don't have to have any heating pipes and so on. It's a very transparent skin. But the skin, the idea is the skin isn't there because you see behind and you see the concert hall. And then going into the concert hall, we worked with the acoustician Larry Kierkegaard. And again, a very collaborative approach. And the theatre designer Fisher Dax. And it's really that kind of combination of all those people working together in a seamless way. If you don't work as a team, it doesn't work. And here it's a true shoebox form. But we introduced one element, which is this fabric ceiling, which you can see here. And so what that allows you to do is that you get the reverberation time of the large shoebox form, but you get the early reflections from the higher and high mid-frequency sounds, which of course is what gives music its directionality. So the idea is it gives both elements within a concert hall. And it was a long, complex problem where every surface was specially designed, every panel was specially tested, and there is no wall that's flat. Every wall is concaved in forms. There are no reflections. There's no corners in the building. So that's the concert hall, and then there isn't time really to go into a lot of detail today, but there's a 500-seat theatre that has a fully computer-operated flat fly tower, so they can basically manipulate it remotely. They have robotic cameras. They can float someone anywhere in space. And then, of course, the tunable different black box spaces, where, again, the panels were specially designed to work acoustically, so that it has the same acoustic as being in a forest. And the director of the project, Johannes Goebbels, was quite insistent that he wanted to have that diffusive nature that you have if you're in the forest, and yet there's just enough reflection where you have directionality. So again, every element had to be specially designed and tested. And I think the interesting aspect is its relationship to the quadrangle and to the rest of the university. Because we use that slope, it's actually a modest building when you walk up to it. And its scale and what goes on inside it was really quite hidden. Until, of course, you step inside and you look down that it sits within this 100-foot kind of canyon with this sort of 100-foot glass wall to one side, 100 feet high. So now just talking more directly about the work we've been doing in the city, in New York City. So I've talked upstate New York, I've talked Mexico, but actually most of our work is based here. And I think being based here has been a great opportunity because it's allowed us to work at all sorts of scales. We're currently, for the last 2 years, have been working with NYU on their master plan and looking at, with Toshiko Mori, looking at the whole kind of Washington Square campus, and it's been a very interesting and complex problem. So that's the kind of one end of the scale. At the other end of the scale, you know, we've done all the bus stops. Not only have we done the bus stops, we've done the first public toilets in 20 years. So I think the last speaking engagement I had at the AIA Downtown Centre was talking about public conveniences. So this makes a welcome change. It was an interesting talk. But, you know, it allows us to, I think, really be integrated into the city. And, in fact, all the way down to the flood mitigation system that we've developed for, you know, around our area, around the Chamber Street station, where we've come up with an idea to deal with flooding that also incorporates seats and bicycle racks and so on. So very much, you know, in and of the city. We also took part in an area that used to be a lot of our work in London, which is affordable housing, and took part in the AIA-sponsored competition for affordable housing with Jonathan Rose and Company and Phipps, who were the developers that led it. And we teamed with Datner. And another interesting aspect, which we don't do except really in New York and Melbourne, is the opportunity to collaborate with other firms. And it's something actually which we enjoy, because it allows you, every time it's a different experience. And it's, I kind of think of it almost as being a musician and being able to play in different kind of formations of bands, if you like, or groups, is that every time you do it, I mean, a creative process is obviously creative, but it's a different kind of process and interaction when you're working with different people. So again, it was a very tight site, and it was interesting. It had this one kind of strip of green, which we didn't want to lose. So effectively, we kind of elevated the green narrow space that was there, and it became this sort of form of terracing of green gardens. So it's called Via Verde, the Green Way. And it's an interesting mix because it actually envelops everything from a kind of, if you like, smaller apartments for rent to apartments for sale to townhouse buildings for sale. So it's an interesting mixed demographic, which I think creates an interesting opportunity, if you like, to create a sense of community. But, you know, we haven't been let off in any way. We have had to still design it to normal housing budgets, which has been, you know, extremely challenging. You know, and it's a question of trying to decide where those compromises can be made and looking at, you know, material use and so on. But we have now finished all the construction drawings, and I think things are now being drawn to a close very soon, and it will start on site fairly soon. And I hope, you know, what the successful part of it will be not just the buildings, but the idea of the creation of this sense of community, where you have this central courtyard where everyone comes into it, and you have all these gardens, some of which are productive, some of which are purely for enjoyment. But hopefully that all adds to this sort of sense of community. And the part I like is actually that the lowest cost apartments in the higher rise buildings, of course, have the best views, and they get to see all the gardens. So I was asked to give a bulletin, I noticed, at the beginning on Fulton Street. So I shall do that now. Another project we won early on, which was the second project after RPI, was the Fulton Street Transit Center. And that's the reason I ended up finally relocating here. And it's, you know, as you know, it's the subway system was built by a number of competing private organizations over 100 years ago. So they never integrated, and where they certainly don't integrate is downtown, where if you ever use the system down there, Fulton Street is quite a complex series of ramps, and it's quite a difficult thing to navigate. So the master plan was done, basically was completed and submitted in 2000, and clearly the tragic events of 9/11 gave a kind of impetus to get this part of the work done, with the hope that it could become a kind of catalyst to help redevelop and recharge the area. So we're building a station, which you can see here, where there is no station. And the buildings now have been demolished, and there's a space which we're working with. And so when we were thinking about the whole theme, one of the interesting aspects was because of the federal funding, it's entirely federally funded, it meant that there could be no air rights or overbuild. So it gave us a kind of unique opportunity to harvest daylight, and it meant that technically we would always have that exposure to the sky. So we felt that was something that we should really, if you like, use the most of. And I think one of the things about New York, with all of its tall buildings, is the kind of connection to the sky and the importance of light. And we wanted to kind of search this idea of, if you like, creating a building that could actually kind of grab the sky and bring it down to the lowest levels. So instead of feeling as though you were 2 floors down in a labyrinth of tunnels, you would feel as though you were basked in sunlight in a kind of public space, almost give it a feel of a city room. And I mean, this bit of Grand Central Terminal, I think, shows the really the impact sunlight can have on a space. Is that, as soon as the sunlight hits the floor, and it completely animates and transforms an environment. So that was really, if you like, the kind of driving, if you like, element to the building. So we have this pavilion building. Obviously, we have the Corbin building, which is this historic building sitting on the side. And then we have the whole city block, and we really access each corner, almost like points of a compass, to a central point. But the main element really is this cone that harvests sunlight and brings it down all the way to the base of the building. And again, we've been working with Schleich on that cable net, and Jamie Carpenter on all the reflectors, which becomes really a kind of centerpiece to the whole building. And if you look at the section, ground level's here. So what it will mean is at the lowest levels, sunlight will come right down to this sort of point. And again, it's, I think, a good example of efficiency, because the original design, we had a compressive dome, which was quite expensive and fairly complex. And then with the rise of real estate prices, we were told that our budget had been changed to being 50 million lower than we thought it was 3 months before. So, but nothing was to change. It had to be the same buildings, do the same things. And so our response to that, again, I think is where a strong diagram can stand these knocks and blows, was to come up, instead of with the dome, was this cone, and then create this very efficient stretched net inside the building. And we did a lot of work with Arup Lighting, mapping and exploring how that reflector would work. So this is the sun, the view of the sun has looking down on Fulton Street, and this is March, and shows how the sunlight reflects on that skin. And so Jamie's then taken that and actually used that to inform all the reflectors, so that they do different things sort of seasonally. And it's not just about quantity of light, it's about the spectral effect of light on the ground, and that it will really, have a really dramatic effect, and a kind of, and also that there'll be an awareness of the seasons. So of course the easiest daylight to deal with is June 21st, when the sun is almost vertical, and so then it plunges down into the building anyway. But more or less for the rest of the year, we use the reflector to reflect sunlight and bounce it around. So hopefully it'll transform the entire feel of this sort of subway gateway to downtown, and the, if you like, the entire experience of arriving in this environment. So really, just to conclude, I think for us, I think what we're striving to really achieve is that buildings will now have to be sustainable and energy efficient. I think we're all agreed on that. And I think the challenge for us as designers and architects is to kind of make this manifest in our work and to celebrate it. And I think what that will allow us to do is to reconnect with the public, so the public feel that architecture is about substance rather than style. Thank you.